This is Speak Up. I am Sandra Shulte. Welcome back to our show. Today I have a gentleman called Simeon Baum who's going to speak about mediation. Simeon Baum is president of Resolve Mediation Services. He has successfully mediated over 1,000 disputes, including the highly publicized one-time big mediation between the architect Libiskin and Silverstein Properties. Remember Larry Silverstein? Over fees related to the rebuilding of the World Trade Center. He is also mediated Donald Trump's $1 billion suit over the West Side Hudson River development. He also was involved in a mediation concerning Archie Comics. Now, you young people won't remember Archie Comics and Archie and Veronica, but us older people, that rings a bell. Simeon Baum was selected for New York Magazine's 2005 through 2014 Best Lawyers edition and Lawyer of the Year for Alternative Resolution Disputes. So if he talks about ADR, remember ADR means Alternative Dispute Resolution. Anyway, that was for the years 2011 and 2014. For over 30 years, Mr. Baum has mediated claims, so it has quite a track record, concerning financial services, fraud, security industry disputes, insurance coverage, property damage, personal injury, bank fraud, and the list of subject matter just goes on and on because he's been doing this for 30 years. Mr. Baum's peers have such high regard for him that they appointed him to the Alternative Dispute Resolution Advisory Group of the Supreme Court of New York County, the Mediation Ethics Advisory Committee for the New York State Court System. He is a founding chairman of the New York State Bar Association's Dispute Resolution Section, and his credits go on and on and on. He has taught alternative dispute mediation at NYU and Benjamin Cardozo School of Law. He has developed, and for 20 years, he has conducted a 3-day training program to train mediators for the Commercial Division of the Supreme Court of New York, Queens, and Westchester County. That's big stuff. To know more about Simeon Baum, simply type his name into your computer. I am truly impressed. I'm so glad you were able to come and be present for this show.
That's a little unusual, but we'll do what we have to do to get it done. Mm-hmm. All of that is a negotiation, but the difference is it's a negotiation where the neutral party, the mediator, is helping them do it.
Now I have another question for you. How does the fact that mediation is not binding hinder or help the final result? People know it's not binding.
I actually think...
Especially when you get people who are very, shall we say, antagonistic. Mm-hmm. Particularly a person who is used to getting his or her own way.
Right, right.
And then looks for another way to get, they can't get this way, I'll get another way.
Right. The person who's used to getting his own way
yes,
is actually a great person to enter the mediation zone.
Really?
Because they can start to understand that if they want to exercise choice, this is the empowerment component, they're going to be given much more freedom to say what they want to say, to accept or not accept the deals that they want to accept or not accept. Much more freedom than if they stay in the litigation zone. They might think they've got a great case, but they don't know. And the lawyer is the one running the case, not them.
They may not think they have a great case, but they figure that if I don't win this in the mediation thing, I can just keep things going forever.
They could, some of that's a resources issue. But I found that even people with massive resources still know the value of a buck. And nobody likes to use money.
Well, they're using someone else's book.
Well, it depends. It
Yeah.
depends. I mean, I guess in a contingent fee case, maybe that's the case. But quite often, we say in a corporate context, everybody's paying lawyers.
Okay.
And those are the people who really, like the masters of the universe, used to getting their own way kind of, personalities. And they recognize that there is a greater range for making choices in this forum than in the other. And if they don't recognize it, my job is to help them see it. So to say, well, and to help them think about the case and help them think about the time that's involved. We do a risk analysis and a transaction cost analysis. So the risk analysis is like, okay, you think you're going to win, the other person thinks they're going to win. What's the likelihood they're going to win? And we might, and I'm doing this very simplistically, let's say 50-50, that Joe wins, and 50-50 that Sally wins. And if Joe wins, there's a chance that Joe's going to get $1 million. There's another chance, depending on a different theory of damages, who's going to get $2 million. Let's say those chances are equal. So the dollars range is like 1.5 million, between 2 and 1.5 million. 50-50 chance, that case is now worth $750. And he's going to spend easily $250,000 on attorney's fees. Now the $750 case has been reduced to $500,000. That's a risk and transaction cost analysis. And we can go through that kind of thinking with those masters of the universe. Now, they don't want to hear it necessarily all the time. They would say, I don't care what it costs. But there's a lot of bravado, and then there's kind of the reality of letting it sink in, thinking about it, being a business person, making business decisions, knowing how your time is being spent if you stay in litigation, going to depositions and answering the various disclosure demands and going to trial and having to talk to your lawyers and having people in the office at the water cooler talking, all this disruption. There's that versus let's get it done, let's figure out an economic value and finish it up. I find that those people come around to thinking it makes sense to get the matter resolved. That's, based, sort of experience. So now, I don't know if I just answered your question or not, Sandy. I'm afraid I sometimes get off the topic here.
We're talking about negotiation versus
Mediation. I don't know how we got into that. But now I did think, because I was thinking about that mindfulness thing, that it might be, meaningful, and because it relates to the nature of the mediator, to talk a little bit about how I ended up in this field, because it's a little different.
Oh.
When I was in 10th grade,
All right.
I trace it back to 10th grade. And I had an English teacher. I went to Horace Mann. At that point, it was called Horace Mann School for Boys. And we had this one teacher, Mr. Lin, Tech Young Lin, and he had us read the Tao Te Ching. And I remember at that point, it's probably still the case, but it was a somewhat competitive school, competitive environment. But as a kid, you don't see it that way. You just take it for granted. You just want to do well. You want to.
That's the way school is.
That's the way it is, right? That's
Yes.
just the way it is. So, but then I read that book, and it was really eye-opening. It's like, oh, wait a second. It's sending messages like, something a contrary message to pure competition, a contrary message to the message that we had that you've got to be the best. You got to be the top. You got to get the power.
Things.
There's another way to do things. That that's all about you. No, it's other people. You participate in something much greater than yourself. And messages that are more along the lines of collaboration, and messages that a good leader, could be actually somebody who has a quality of humility. which is, I mean, we're seeing all kinds of things today in terms of our models of leadership. But that humility could be actually a real significant quality. Yielding, flexibility, listening, that these qualities, these were messages I heard in the Tao Te Ching. And we read it again in my Far East history course in 12th grade, and it led me to become interested in contemplative traditions. And when I went to college, even though from the time I was 5, I thought I was going to be a lawyer, because my mother's father was a trial lawyer, and I thought I liked him. I liked them both, but I particularly identified.
I'm going to be uncle.
So I knew from then, but I found out you could still end up in that place and still study what you wanted in college back in the 70s. And so I studied philosophy and religion, and actually did graduate work in the comparative study of religion. And some of the ways of thinking that I found in that area made me a little uncomfortable seeing how we play things out in an adversarial system, and made me super identify with mediation, when in the early 90s, a little bit over 20 years ago actually, I discovered mediation. I went to a training given, it was either Margaret Shaw or Kathy Cronin Harris or Linda Singer or Michael Lewis. I think one of their trainings back then, and everything they said
Resonated.
totally. So that I felt like, okay, so they're saying we can think in terms of both and instead of either or. Not the Aristotelian either or. Think inclusively. We can think openly. It's not black and white. It's living color. And all aspects of the human being can be brought in. There's a holism in mediation that I love. You're dealing with the whole person. You're not segmenting. And there's a holism that goes beyond the whole person to the group, and beyond the group to their entire context. And that kind of openness and appreciation, awareness and flexibility, the adjustment to reality, actuality. So I saw mediation as offering a possibility of integrating something that I'd struggled with, which is, on the one hand, I've always felt we need a justice system. You need to believe in justice. But you also, there's a real value to harmony, and they don't always correspond. And sometimes people make promises they can't keep because circumstances change or their abilities are different from what they thought. We should have ways
to respect that.
Yeah. To
be willing to respect that.
Right. And to be able to adjust for the realities of life. And so how do we both adjust to the realities of our own lives and the lives of others, and show the possibility of forgiveness, the possibility of reconciliation, the possibility of understanding? How do we handle people's needs compassionately and appropriately, and also live in a world where expectations can appropriately be met, a world where we have norms of justice and fairness. And how do we work this all out? And so for me, mediation's the forum for me, where we have in this society found a way for people really to work with justice and harmony, and try to work those norms together through that process. So I found it very, great opportunity. But I do trace it back to 10th grade, when I first heard the Tao Te Ching, or read the Tao Te Ching, and in my mediation trainings with Steve Hockman now, we will, for hard-bitten lawyers who've done, commercial law for, 40 years, 30 years, whatever it is, training them. We'll introduce stuff from the Tao Te Ching. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to read a passage or two.
Go ahead.
So let's see. So these are what this is a translation by Stephen Mitchell. I have to tell you, well, when I do a mediation, usually I'll read just something before I get started, just to calm me down and to send to me the message as a mediator. It's not about me. It's about them and how can I help. That's sort of the core message. But I'm wondering what's a nice one. There's a beautiful one. This is in 81 quatrains or little chapters, poetic chapters. This Stephen Mitchell translation. He's a American poet who I think studied with the Zen master for 13 years. Now I substitute the word mediators for masters. He's got masters in here. I think many translations will say the sage, because I think this book 2,500 years ago, whether it was really written or whether it was a compilation.
Well, perhaps 2,500 years ago, there was like a beginner, person who is a little further along in the process of getting to nirvana, should we call it? In other words, a person who has the steps of maturing to a certain level.
Yeah.
And the person who is the master has gone through all those stages of knowledge,
right.
of acquiring the knowledge.
Right, yeah. And so Mitchell uses master. I've seen translations use the sage. I think at the time, 2,500 years ago, at the time of Confucius and Mencius in China, people were running around from little kingdom to little kingdom, giving advice to the rulers.
That's true.
And so in some ways, it was really advice on leadership. Mm-hmm. And so it's designed a little bit with the notion of the ruler sage in mind. Mm-hmm. But I think over time, we've collectively, society, as the book's been passed through the generations, people have seen it in all walks of life as being significant or, usable. So I'm going to substitute in the word mediator for the word masters.
And the book is?
The Tao Te Ching. And again,
T-A-O, new word, C-H-I-N-G.
Actually, there's another word in there, Sandy.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it's T-A-O, pronounced Tao, T-E, de, and then C-H-I-N-G. And that means actually Tao means the way, like the great way. Okay. The way that cannot be mapped. And de actually means virtue. Or, so an old translation by Arthur Whaley called it the way and its power. And I think Ching is like treatise or something like that. So, they used to, at the time, this is attributed to Lao Tzu, which means old sage, or old man. And it's actually, I teach a negotiation. I teach a negotiation course, and one of my students wrote a paper, and recently I saw in the footnotes, the footnote was Tzu, T-Z-U, instead of Lao Tzu. But,
please give us the poem.
Okay, sure, okay, all right, sure. So, the ancient mediators were profound and subtle. Their wisdom was unfathomable. There's no way to describe it. All we can describe is their appearance. They were careful as someone crossing an iced-over stream in the winter, alert as a warrior in enemy territory, courteous as a guest, fluid as melting ice, shapeable as a block of wood, receptive as a valley, clear as a glass of water? Do you have the patience to wait till your mud settles and the water is clear? Can you remain unmoving till the right action arises by itself? The mediator does not seek fulfillment, not seeking, not expecting. She's present and can welcome all things. So, I think as a model for mediators, if you hear about the transformatives and riding along in the back seat, this is a beautiful image of the mediators present, but not domineering. And there's another concept. Actually, I'll see if I can quickly read one more. Chapter 2, which is a quickie. A concept of wu-wei, or non-action. And the idea is, mediators might feel that they need to make something happen, right? So we want to get those parties to do something. And parties will often say, get them to do this or get them to do that, right? But the way it really works is we all participate in a process together. And it's the being together and the interactivity while being together without its feeling forced, a kind of welcoming and eliciting as we're moving together, maybe through time, in this process. That lack of racing and pushing is part of what enables a mediator really to be effective as a mediator. And embedded in the Tao Te Ching is this concept, wu-wei, inaction or non-action, which is similarly a concept. It's more like being as opposed to doing. It's more like open presence and responsiveness, as opposed to coming in, with a plan and forcing people to move in a particular direction or a particular goal. Doesn't mean you haven't prepared a lot, because we said you do prepare a lot. But so here's one. Now, I guess the first part of chapter 2 talks about relativity. Essentially that concepts of good and bad, beautiful and ugly, kind of depend on each other. But the later part is where you hear first introduce this notion of non-doing, wu-wei, which then goes all the way through the book. When people see some things as beautiful, other things become ugly. When people see some things as good, other things become bad. Being and non-being create each other. Difficult and easy support each other. Long and short define each other. High and low depend on each other. Being before and after follow each other. Therefore, the mediator acts without doing anything and teaches without saying anything. Things arise and she lets them come. Things disappear and she lets them go. She has but doesn't possess. Acts but doesn't expect. When her work is done, she forgets it. That's why it lasts forever. And there's another place in here somewhere where, at least in this translation, talking about the leader, you talk about, the best leader is the one nobody knows. Then the
That's
next,
right.
Right?
Yes.
And then the next best is the one that's loved. And the next best is the one that's respected. And the next best is the one that's feared and despised, right? So at the end of that segment, it says, for the best leader, people say, amazing. When the work is done, they say, amazing. We did it all by ourselves. I'm Simeon Baum, and very easy to find on Google. My website is mediators.org. mediators.com. Okay, mediators.com. And on the website, you'll see my office is in the Fox News building, 1211 Avenue of the Americas in New York City.
Do you have any tips for mediators?
Yes. The first tip would be read the Tao Te Ching. I really recommend it.
How about for negotiators?
For negotiators, I've got a couple of tips.
Go on.
Okay. Tips for negotiators would be, number one, prepare. Okay, and to prepare well, how much time do we have for this? A little, a lot? Can I say anything?
Say
okay.
what you have to say.
All right, I'm gonna really give them some tips. Prepare well. As a negotiator, frankly, the tips I would give a negotiator are the same tips I would give a representative in mediation. Before you come into a bargaining session, think about if it's a legal negotiation, get to know your case, dig for the information, get a clear sense of your legal BATNA, of your strengths and weaknesses of the case. But also, as a negotiator, think about what's important to you. Get to know your actual BATNA. What's the deal? What are you? Where are you now? And what is it that you're looking for? When you make a deal, when you're thinking of making a deal, it's helpful to figure out, what are my interests? What are the other guy's interests? Don't just think about yourself. Think about the other person too.
At this point, Simeon, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on our show. Until the next time, this is Speak Up. I am Sandra Shulte. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day.